Chairman Stan Saylor.
Welcome, Mr. Secretary. It's good to see you again. My first question is kind of a softball question to you, hopefully. The question is, with the new federal act of Every Student Succeeds Act, how do you contemplate the General Assembly, the House and Senate, playing what part in that as you move forward with the implementation of the new federal program?
Absolutely. With the authorization of ESSA, we see the General Assembly being partners in, first providing guidance and ultimately making recommendations to the Federal Department of Education around changes to our expectations. Currently, we're now gearing up to engage in a listening and engagement tour, where we, much like what we've done with the school performance profile and what we're hoping to do, what we are doing around the Keystones as a graduation requirement moratorium, we are going to create working groups that will travel the state and engage with multiple stakeholders to solicit input from them and feedback from them around what we really need to consider and work towards with this authorization. As we had done with school performance profile, we see, General Assembly as being an active participant, not only in part of those discussions, but continued feedback as we really align guidance and recommendations.
Mr. Secretary, the budget the governor signed and he walked away from the previous distribution of the Ready to Learn block grants using a formula that he designed, not the General Assembly had agreed to. The formula shortchanged many of the charter schools by $8 million from our previous year. In addition to this funding elimination for charter schools, in the 2015-16 budget proposal, he included a cutting of the cyber schools by $50 million, codifying the pension double dip to save $110 million, ending the fund balances of charter schools, netting $148 million, and changing the special education funding formula to save $180 million there. That combined savings or cut to the charter schools was $488 million. Does your vision for charter school reform in Pennsylvania include anything other than cutting their funds? And the second question to go with that is, what is the goal of cutting these funds to charter schools in those large amounts? I mean, I guess the question many people are saying and across the state is that this administration is looking to close the charter schools of Pennsylvania, all of them.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to first address part of the last question, and that is the Department of Education, we're not anti-charter. We understand that there's a need for high-quality charter schools, and charter schools are public schools. We also understand that there's a need for accountability for charter schools. Actually, there's a need for accountability for all schools, which is why we're recommending and really asking to create a system of accountability, including charter school accountability. Even great performing charter schools have been asking for a system of accountability because they're being painted with a broad brush, and those lower performing charters or charters that are not expending resources as they should are tainting the reputation and the movement of good charters. In relation to the Ready to Learn block grant, it's our understanding that as we allocate those funds to school districts, those funds will then be part of the calculation or the per student calculation to charter schools. So they actually will be receiving the proportionate share of the Ready to Learn block grant. So revenue that's brought into school districts is then divided by, per student, with the exceptions that and everyone knows, everyone on the committee knows the exceptions. But the Ready to Learn block grant will be included as one of those expenses that will allow and provide for greater per student funding to charter schools. So when taking that into account, we understood as part of the formula, charter schools would receive their proportionate share. We have made some recommendations around cyber charter schools and charter schools. Probably the recommendations that I'm most aggressive about is the recommendation to move towards having a proposal that moves towards the recommendation of the Special Education Funding Commission, which traditional public schools currently do follow. Our request is that charter schools also follow the recommendation of the Special Ed Funding Commission and are allocated funding according to the tier or the level of need of students. Now, in relation to cyber charter schools. We have made recommendations around reductions of some cost, the cost of expenditures for libraries, non-public support, tax assessment and collection, non-public health, community services. So we have asked for a reduction in those line items, assuming that cyber charter schools do not incur those costs. We've also looked at a cap at the 70th percentile of expenses of school districts, and it is primarily, to share with you, it's primarily a result of understanding, and for regular education, if you look at one specific cyber charter program, and just picking one, and we have schools that will pay $7,000 for educating a child, and we have other school districts that will pay as high as $17,500 for educating that child, and all within the same program. So I think much of what we're asking in relation to regular education changes in funding or paying at the 70th percentile, and some of the recommendations we're making around special education is not to pick on the charters, it's just to right-size payments to charters. I would share, as we're really, as we've started to see some of the successes around charters and also some of the many challenges, I think the time is ripe for us to, again, engage in conversation around charter accountability and, and support for funding charter schools. So I look forward to having that conversation.
Mr. Secretary, I don't disagree with about accountability, and I think this General Assembly is very much interested in that, but it seems to me like we're trying to hold particularly charter schools who are performing better than some of the public schools more accountable than we are the public schools who they are taking students from. And many of these students are leaving the public schools to get to a safer environment. That's some of the reasons, some cases, better education. And I think that there has to be a balance. If you're going to hold charter schools accountable, and I'm all for that because I think that's critical for our future for all of us, especially as I get close to retirement. I want to make sure those kids can get a good job and pay my Social Security. But it just seems to me that we are on two different tracks. We're not doing enough to hold public school districts accountable for their mismanagement, as we are. When you look at Philadelphia, you look at Chester Upland, you can look at York, the failures of our state to hold those school districts accountable for what they've done to those children is immoral. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that, Mr. Secretary, that...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be things that you're going to hear that you may not agree with. There's going to be things that you're going to hear that you agree with. I'm not asking you to applaud. I'm telling you not to applaud. I'm asking you to listen, contact your legislator after the meeting, but we're going to try to keep this a very formal hearing. It's being televised. I appreciate your passion, but I want to keep a hearing in order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my concern as Education Chairman is that we do come up with accountabilities, and I look to the department to work with the General Assembly to come up for accountability measures on all the school districts and holding school districts and superintendents, as well as charter schools, cyber and brick and mortar, accountable, Mr. Secretary. But I think that when we look at another thing with charter schools, the administration has said they want to eliminate the fund balances for charter schools, where we allow school districts to have fund balances. Many of the bonding agencies require that a minimum of 5% fund balance for our school districts across the state, all 500. Yet the administration is proposing to not allow a fund balance for charter schools. So how do you envision that those charter schools in this kind of a situation would have been able to stay open and continue to educate children without those fund balances?
Mm-hmm. And if I can address just one statement and then answer the question, I agree with you fully, Chairman. We have to continue to build a robust system of accountability for traditional public schools as well, which is why both chairs of the Education Committee, we've been discussing and working together around updating the school performance profile and looking more holistically about student achievement and school performance, moving away from this one measure of standardized tests and really focusing on factors we know improve educational outcomes for all students. So I agree fully. Not only do we have to build an accountability system for charter schools, we have to continue to build a robust accountability system for traditional public schools as well, and hold everyone accountable to students and teaching and learning. In relation to the discussion of fund balance for charters, it's absolutely one of the conversations that we have to continue having. I think what's happened as a result of many of the systems of mismanagement that we've seen over the course of the past few years for all schools, the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. And so what's happened as a result of significant fund balances in some charter schools, not all, you're correct, and exorbitant fees, administration fees in some charter schools, not all. It's forced decisions to be made one way or another, and I think this is an opportunity as we engage in this conversation, the conversation around accountability, to really come to common ground and make some really sound decisions.
Just last question. It has to go back to the accountability measure, and Secretary, it goes to my home county of York. The governor paid $140,000 to have a study done to come up with a plan for York City. They made several recommendations, but the recovery offer, Carolyn Saylor is supposed to make a report to PDE within 90 days of that report. Still has not, as of February, received that report for updating their 2013 recovery plan. When is that plan coming in, and how are we measuring what's going on there now with all the money that we've spent? Is York really recovering?
It's a great question. So I just recently approved the updating of their recovery plan, so that should be made public very, very soon. And we've actually put very specific measurable goals, both 90-day goals that have been enacted, although they'll be part of the plan, but it's something that we've been monitoring very closely, as well as longitudinal goals. We've also looked at 4 quadrants of things, opportunities to address quickly, and those that may take a bit more time to start to address. So not only will that report be made public, but some of our successes and challenges will be made public as well. I can share with you, and I'm sure we'll have opportunities to discuss school improvement as we continue in the hearing. There have been some great areas of promise shown in relation to York, and one which is happening now is an investment on updating the curriculum so that students are actually learning content and using material that are aligned to high standards. And we're really proud of the work that's happening at York, the alignment at York. It's not an easy task. I mean, it's been hard work, but it's been intentional, focused hard work. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I'm looking at the graph Representative Grote showed you, and Representative Bradford earlier asked you those questions. And based upon those performances, I mean, you can see Governor Rendell's the one who cut roughly $510 million out of education in 2008, 2009, and Governor Rendell cut another $210 million out of state funding for education in 2010. So I think what I want to say as Education Chairman, and this whole thing that's been going on around the state about Governor Corbett cutting taxes or cutting education funding over those years is just an outright lie. But more importantly, we're still missing the point, and you and I have discussed this many times, education is about children. And we so often get wrapped up in these issues of dollars. And my colleague, and I appreciate from Montgomery County, but when I look at school districts like Lancaster County, York City, who have been underfunded by $40, $50 million a year, and I see the city of Philadelphia, which is only, based upon the agreement, bipartisan agreement, Democrats, Republicans alike, in the basic education funding formula, is only underfunded by 5%. Yet we gave Philadelphia $57 million to make them whole, basically, according to the underfunding level. Yet only in Reading, which is 95% underfunded, got barely anything, $2 million. Yet they were owed $95 million. York City, Lancaster City is underfunded by $47 million. And they suffered because the governor allocated the dollars different than what this General Assembly wanted to. I keep finding the way we're doing education policy around here is not about accountability. It's about whose political game we're playing. Who are we contributing to campaigns to? Who are we looking for votes from? Rather than sitting down and dealing with children in Lancaster who deserve the same funding that the children of Philadelphia get, the same children in York and Montgomery County deserve the same funding. When they're underfunded, they deserve the same dollars. Why did the governor decide to make Philadelphia whole and leave Lancaster, York, Scranton, Reading, Harrisburg on the limb when they were far more underfunded than the city of Philadelphia, which was only 5% underfunded.
So I know the governor focused heavily on providing equity, and first I'll take a half a step back and share. So I understand the argument around the amount of funding provided education over the course of the past 5 years, I will say, for example, or previous year, 4 years before the final year. And I've engaged personally, locally, and now at the state level in conversation around the fact that the legislature, the General Assembly, has never voted on a reduction to education funding. I fully understand that argument. And I continue to share the reality of that argument when you take into account the structural deficit or the structural costs associated, as you should, with pensions and health care and all
But
those.
Mr. Saylor, let me stop you there because I know we want to be quick here. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about why did the governor decide to make Philly whole and leave Lancaster City, York City, Harrisburg City, Scranton, and others with huge holes that they deserved more than the city of Philadelphia? Why did he distribute money to Philadelphia unfairly at the price of the other city school districts? Do not third-class cities like Reading and York and Harrisburg and Lancaster, who have been way underfunded compared to the Philly school district. It's not an argument whether Philadelphia needs more money or any school district needs more money. It's about why did he choose to make whole Philadelphia and leave other poor children who are far poorer than the city of Philadelphia based upon the Basic Education Funding Commission's report. Again, bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans agreed to the report, agreed to the poverty levels and everything else. The cities I cited are far more poor, far more underfunded, and yet received no help from this governor when he finally decided to distribute those dollars. Why did he decide to do it that way?
So taking everything discussed, the governor allocated the funding on with two considerations. One, of course, the work of moving forward around the work of the Basic Education Funding Commission, but also trying to make up for the reductions that were made to some of the poor school districts. So I know the governor had been very intentional and has shared a number of times that the need to establish a sound foundation, and I know I continue to say that, but it's the best way I can explain it. When you look at the reductions of what ultimately ended up being reductions to the amount of spending going to classrooms, he's worked very, very hard within that 15, 16 year to make up for the disproportionate reductions that he feels, the administration feels, that I feel were disproportionate, so we can move forward with the recommendation of the commission and fund accordingly.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I don't think that he did that. I think that he totally hurt children in Lancaster, York, and elsewhere by his decision. Rather than helping those who are in the most need, he chose to play a political game with the city of Philadelphia. And that is my opinion. And I don't think you're going to change the opinion of York and Lancaster residents and Scranton residents that he played a game in politics. And it's a shame because this is about children, not about politics. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.